My narcissistic parents are angry with me for not ignoring my autistic brother's predatory behavior towards my beautiful girlfriend. My brother is 32 years old, he's never had a job, he dropped out of community college after 2 semesters for never doing his assignments, he's lived with my parents his entire life, he sleeps all day, and stays up all night playing video games and watching adult films. Both my brother and I, 27, are diagnosed autistic and present our symptoms similarly, but I've been working since I was 17, got my driver's license at 17, bought my first car at 24 and started college right after finishing high school. My parents constantly use my brother's autism as an excuse for his appalling behavior even though we're both on the spectrum. In November, I moved back in with my parents because I left an abusive relationship and had chronic health issues. Living with them hasn't been the best because my older brother is really weird and my parents coddle him a lot. It's like watching a grown man wearing a diaper and getting fed airplane style. I met my current girlfriend 23 and we've been together for a year. She's really gorgeous and sweet. Recently, she had some in mid-2021 and in early 2022 she had some extenuating circumstances where my family agreed to let her live with us. My brother was immediately pleased with this development, and behaved inappropriately really quickly. It started off with him creepily staring anytime her and I kissed, which progressed to him following her into the bathroom anytime he saw her go in there for a shower until he figured out she always locked the door because of him, and the straw that broke the camel's back was him trying to come into our bedroom uninvited at 3 in the morning while we slept. Every time he behaved inappropriately we mentioned it to my parents, but all that really happened were excuses made for him because he's autistic and brief conversation with him about not doing those things again, but he still did. Whatever we wanted and my parents didn't care. After the bedroom incident, my parents fully blamed my girlfriend for what happened because my brother went to them to complain that we were being mean. They kicked my girlfriend out, making her homeless for a brief period of time, and she had a PTSD panic attack since my brother made her feel unsafe. As a result of this, my girlfriend and I got an apartment together and I moved out as well because I didn't want to be in the same house as my brother. I was upset with the way my girlfriend was treated, and I wasn't willing to break up with her, which my parents wanted me to do. I had a calm conversation with them explaining why I was moving out, where I explained it's their house so they are more than entitled to make rules concerning their own home. However, I was not going to continue living somewhere my girlfriend wasn't welcome and where my brother's predatory behavior was condoned. At first they told me they love me, they're sorry they ever made me feel that way, they want me to keep a key to the house because I'm always welcome over, and that if I ever needed to move back and I could. I was glad we ended on a good note, considering everything that happened. But several days later, I went over to pick up some more of my things only to find that my parents had changed the locks on the door. Later that same week they tell me they're angry with me for being ungrateful, saying I hate them, and calling them bad parents, none of which I ever said. They went on to tell me that they didn't want to speak to me for a week because they were upset, needed time to process, and because they thought I needed to feel what it was like to be cut out of the family. I respected their wishes and later my parents agreed to family therapy, which they quickly backed out of because they were only willing to do it over a 3-way video call and my therapist wasn't able to do that. I told my parents I would be willing to attend family therapy with a therapist of their choice who could do the 3-way video call, but that had yet to happen. That same Sunday my parents invited me over for dinner, which I thought went well, only to find they would continue to dodge my calls and leave my texts on read after that night. They eventually contacted me and told me to stop using their house as storage and pick up my things, despite requesting that I stay away for a week. My girlfriend and I went over to pick up the rest of our stuff, which wasn't the best idea because my brother kept staring creepily at her and making nasty comments whenever he wanted. My girlfriend was really uncomfortable, but at least it was quick so she didn't have to suffer for too long. Still, my brother needs to stop doing that, especially because she's a lot younger than him. I briefly brought it up to my parents, but they told me to just leave because they didn't want to deal with useless drama at the moment. I don't get why they aren't willing to talk about the issues that led to me moving out. They haven't even come over to see our new apartment after being invited over. Because, despite the circumstances, I still love them and want a relationship with them since this type of behavior is highly uncharacteristic of them. Understandably, my girlfriend isn't fond of them but told me she doesn't mind me inviting my parents over because it's important to her that I have a relationship with my parents for the sake of my mental well-being. I just don't know what to do to get them to listen. My narcissistic parents are angry with me for not ignoring my autistic brother's predatory behavior towards my beautiful girlfriend. I have been working through some things in therapy and I had a bit of an epiphany. For years, I thought my parents were doing me a favor by letting me live with them, but things started to unravel the more I thought about it and talked to my therapist. I'm currently 27, but I didn't start living on my own until I was 22 and always thought I was a failure or a late bloomer. But then I remembered I tried moving out on my own when I was 20. I found a friend who was willing to be my roommate at the time and we were apartment hunting together. I eventually told my parents I wanted to move out and my mom told me they wouldn't be able to afford the rent for their apartment if I wasn't there to pitch in, and my dad asked me, "How are you going to find a roommate? You can't even find someone to hang out with you on your birthday." When I lived with them I didn't give them all my money from work, but I could never save more than $500 because they would inevitably fall behind on some bill and I would have to help. A lot of times I didn't have the money to help, so it was normal for me to sell my things at a pawn shop to pitch, which was never asked of my older brother. I only had to stop contributing to my parents' finances once I was homeless. I ended up reconnecting with my extended family who let me couch surf, and they told my parents they thought it was weird I gave them so much money. When my parents lived in New York and I lived alone in Texas for 2 years, I was actually living my best life. I dropped 120 pounds, I was on the honor roll at my college, I bought a car. I was doing so well. Later, my mother admitted to me she was actually angry and resentful toward me for getting my first job at 17 because the government took away my disability money that she was managing. I feel like that's one reason my older brother is still treated as The golden child, he still gets disability that my mom manages 100% and is fairly obedient to her. It just made me think, wow. Sorry I'm such a disappointment because I wasn't an obedient little disability check for you and I wanted a life of my own. I was also sexually abused in first grade by a neighbor's teenage son, and when I asked my mom why she wasn't more protective of me, she said, I was so concerned with making sure that never happened to your brother that it never occurred to me that it could happen to you. I used to think my parents were very moral and ethical people, but the more therapy I went to, the more I'm noticing patterns. For example, my mom was always doing research on narcissists and claiming that all my grandparents were narcissists, so that's why we went no contact with them for over a decade. At the time, I was a kid so I believed her, but then I realized a classic narcissist tactic is to isolate people from others who can help them. I even remember being a freshman in high school and my mom terrifying me by convincing my grandfather had hired private investigators to stalk us. Knowing my grandfather now that I'm an adult, I know that is something he'd never do. Ever since the incident with my girlfriend and my brother, my parents have been in very low contact because they're salty that I didn't dump my girlfriend and excuse my brother's creepy behavior. During this whole situation, my grandfather has been nothing short of a rock for me. He and my step-grandmother have been offering me advice, helped me get career counseling services, wants to help with my tuition now that I'm back in college, and have offered to buy plane tickets for both my girlfriend and I to fly cross-country to spend Thanksgiving with them and get the opportunity to introduce my girlfriend to them. He's been very clear that he sides with me on the disagreement with my parents because he doesn't agree with my brother's behavior and has stated the obvious, that my parents don't seem to grasp I'm a grown man and can date who I want and live my life as I see fit. I feel really lucky to have him around, but at the same time I'm still incredibly frustrated with my parents. I have a large extended family and I've heard through the grapevine that my parents want me to move back with them, but on their terms, and they're going low contact with me to teach me a lesson. All I can think is what kind of delusional fairy tale world do they live in where I would abandon a healthy relationship with my girlfriend and have my own place to move back in with them just to be the scapegoat for all of my brother's BS?